Sergeant First Class Nicole Anderson raised her M4 carbine with trembling hands at Fort Leonard Wood's primary rifle range, preparing to demonstrate marksmanship fundamentals to 36 basic training recruits at 10 a.m. But what the watching soldiers didn't know was that those same unsteady hands had once delivered precision shots that saved an entire Special Forces team from certain death in the mountains of Afghanistan. Which city are you watching from? Share it in the comments. Maybe someone else from your city is here too. And if you believe heroes can appear in the most unexpected ways, hit subscribe and give this video a like. First Sergeant David Martinez observed Nicole's struggles with the familiar expression of professional frustration that had become standard whenever watching her attempt weapons instruction. In his 23 years of training Army recruits, he had never encountered a drill instructor who appeared to lack fundamental competence with the very skills she was supposed to teach. Her hands shook visibly every time she handled weapons, and her shooting demonstrations consistently resulted in spectacular misses that undermined trainee confidence. "Anderson," First Sergeant Martinez called out, his voice carrying the weary tone of someone who had exhausted every coaching technique available. "These recruits need to see proper shooting techniques demonstrated by someone who actually knows how to hit targets." Nicole finally managed to steady her rifle enough to fire, but the shot missed the 50-meter target by several feet, impacting the dirt berm with a small puff of dust that marked another embarrassing failure in front of soldiers who were supposed to be learning from her example. Private Wilson, one of the newer recruits who had been questioning Nicole's qualifications for weeks, whispered to his battle buddy with obvious skepticism, "How is she supposed to teach us marksmanship when she can't even hit a target that's practically in her face?" The comment reflected growing concerns throughout the training company about the quality of instruction they were receiving from someone who appeared to struggle with basic military skills that every drill instructor should have mastered years earlier. Nicole knew exactly what her recruits thought of her: incompetent, possibly fraudulent, and definitely unsuitable for the responsibilities of training soldiers who would soon face combat situations where marksmanship skills could determine survival. The irony was devastating, because the truth about her background was classified at levels that made most officers' clearances worthless. What none of them knew was that Nicole Anderson had once been Master Sergeant Nicole Torres, attached to classified special operations units with precision shooting records that would make her current struggles seem impossible. But that service was buried in psychological evaluations and identity protection protocols involving treatment for combat trauma that had shattered her ability to handle weapons in peaceful environments. The morning marksmanship training continued, with Nicole attempting to demonstrate various shooting positions, but her performance remained consistently poor, despite months of practice and remedial instruction from senior NCOs who were running out of patience with her apparent inability to improve. "Anderson, your prone position is unstable, your breathing is erratic, and your trigger control looks like you're trying to crush the weapon," observed Drill Sergeant Thompson, the senior marksmanship instructor who had been trying unsuccessfully to improve Nicole's shooting skills. Nicole adjusted her position with movements that appeared awkward and uncertain, despite theoretical knowledge that exceeded that of most experienced shooters. Her classroom instruction about ballistics and shooting fundamentals was excellent, but she couldn't demonstrate the practical application of concepts she could explain perfectly. The afternoon brought advanced combat training exercises designed to test recruits' ability to apply marksmanship skills under simulated stress conditions. Nicole was responsible for supervising multiple firing positions while providing tactical guidance that would prepare soldiers for combat deployments. But 25 minutes into the exercise, equipment malfunctions created a dangerous situation that transformed training into genuine emergency, requiring immediate tactical response to prevent casualties. A malfunction in the automated target systems caused several training devices to continue operating during what should have been a ceasefire, creating realistic enemy fire simulation that trapped 4 recruits in exposed positions where they couldn't safely withdraw without risking injury from training equipment. "Ceasefire! Ceasefire!" shouted First Sergeant Martinez as he realized that soldiers were facing actual danger rather than planned training scenarios. "We have personnel trapped in the impact zone with malfunctioning equipment, creating genuine hazard." The situation required someone with advanced tactical training to coordinate rescue operations under simulated combat conditions, but the available instructors were trained for teaching rather than operational deployment of combat skills. That's when everything changed, and Nicole Anderson revealed capabilities that would shock everyone who had been watching her struggle with basic weapons handling for months. Without hesitation, Nicole moved toward the trapped soldiers with tactical precision that demonstrated extensive combat experience. Her movements were fluid and professional, showing none of the uncertainty that had characterized her previous performance throughout months of training duties. Martinez, I need 2 support teams to establish suppressive positions while I coordinate extraction, Nicole commanded with authority that cut through the chaos like a blade. Her voice carried the unmistakable tone of someone accustomed to making life-or-death decisions under extreme pressure. First Sergeant Martinez stared at Nicole with amazement as she coordinated rescue operations with professional competence that exceeded anything he had observed during her entire assignment at Fort Leonard Wood. Her tactical commands were precise, her timing was perfect, and her leadership inspired confidence in ways that made her previous struggles seem impossible to believe. Anderson? Where did this come from? Martinez asked as he watched Nicole direct tactical movements that would challenge experienced infantry NCOs with years of combat experience. Nicole was focused entirely on the rescue operation, her hands steady and confident as she worked to extract trapped soldiers safely. First Sergeant, I have operational experience that's not reflected in my current assignment record. The rescue was executed flawlessly under Nicole's direction. All trapped soldiers were extracted without injury. The malfunctioning equipment was disabled, and the emergency was resolved through tactical coordination that demonstrated capabilities far beyond basic drill instructor training. But the real revelation was still coming, and it would transform everyone's understanding of who Sergeant First Class Nicole Anderson really was beneath the struggling instructor facade. As Nicole was securing her equipment after the successful rescue, her locker key caught on her tactical vest and spilled several personal items across the ground. Among them was a document that made every person present freeze in complete recognition and awe. A Congressional Medal of Honor citation, official and unmistakable, lay among Nicole's scattered belongings. The distinctive blue border and formal language were instantly recognizable as representing the highest military decoration that could be awarded to any American service member. "Holy shit," whispered Private Johnson, staring at the citation with disbelief. "Sergeant Anderson, that's a Medal of Honor citation. Is that yours?" Nicole quickly gathered her scattered items, but every recruit and instructor present had seen the document, and the implications were staggering. Congressional Medal of Honor recipients represented less than 1% of military personnel and were among the most elite warriors in American history. First Sergeant Martinez approached Nicole with expressions ranging from confusion to growing respect. "Anderson, that citation has your name on it. You're a Congressional Medal of Honor recipient?" Nicole held the document with obvious reluctance to discuss its significance. "First Sergeant, yes. It was awarded for actions during classified operations that I'm not authorized to discuss." Martinez was processing the revelation that his supposedly incompetent drill instructor was actually one of the most decorated soldiers in U.S. military history. The contradiction between her apparent struggles and her actual background was almost impossible to comprehend. The citation detailed actions during a classified operation where Nicole had single-handedly defended a Special Forces outpost against overwhelming enemy forces, eliminating 37 enemy combatants and saving the lives of 12 American personnel who had been pinned down for over 6 hours. Anderson, Medal of Honor recipients, don't get assigned to basic training instructor duties unless there are extraordinary circumstances involved, Martinez said, his voice showing newfound respect, mixed with professional curiosity. Nicole realized that maintaining her cover was no longer possible, given the exposure of her most significant military decoration. "First Sergeant, I can't discuss the operational details, but I was awarded the medal for actions during special operations missions that required extended classification." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Colonel Sarah Peterson, the commanding officer of Fort Leonard Wood's training command, who had been notified about both the emergency situation and the discovery of Nicole's concealed Medal of Honor citation. "Sergeant Anderson," Colonel Peterson said, studying Nicole with obvious respect and curiosity about circumstances that had brought a Medal of Honor recipient to basic training instruction. I believe we need to have a comprehensive discussion about your background and assignment. 2 hours later, Nicole found herself in Colonel Peterson's office, along with First Sergeant Martinez and a civilian psychiatrist who had introduced himself as Dr. James Wilson from the Department of Defense Psychological Recovery Programs. Sergeant First Class Anderson, Colonel Peterson began studying a file with obvious classification markings that had appeared with unusual speed. Your Medal of Honor citation and your performance during today's emergency have raised significant questions about your actual background and current assignment circumstances. Nicole sat at attention, knowing that her carefully maintained cover was about to be fully revealed to people with appropriate security clearances. Yes, ma'am. Dr. Wilson opened an extensive file containing documents that Nicole recognized from her psychological treatment and identity transition process. Nicole, your Medal of Honor was awarded for actions during Operation Crimson Shield, where you held a strategic position against numerically superior forces for 18 hours while coordinating extraction of wounded Special Forces personnel. Colonel Peterson was clearly impressed despite her confusion about Nicole's current situation. Anderson, your actual service record includes 4 years with classified special operations units in multiple combat deployments in hostile territory. Why are you struggling with basic marksmanship instruction when you possess some of the most advanced combat skills in military history? Nicole chose her words carefully, balancing operational security with the need to explain her current circumstances. Ma'am, I'm participating in a psychological recovery program designed to help combat veterans process severe trauma while transitioning back to conventional military assignments. Dr. Wilson nodded with professional understanding and empathy. Nicole, your marksmanship difficulties are related to post-traumatic stress disorder that makes routine training environments psychologically triggering, while your operational capabilities remain completely intact during genuine emergency situations. Colonel Peterson considered this explanation while reviewing documentation of Nicole's months of apparent incompetence during drill instructor duties. Anderson, are you telling me that your training struggles are therapeutic rather than actual skill deficiencies? Yes, ma'am. The recovery program requires participants to work through trauma responses in controlled environments while maintaining readiness for situations where lives might depend on accessing combat experience and specialized training. Dr. Wilson leaned forward with obvious respect for Nicole's service and the challenges she had overcome. Nicole, today's rescue operation demonstrated that your tactical leadership and combat skills are not just intact, but exceptional, indicating successful progress in your psychological recovery process. Colonel Peterson stood with clear admiration for Nicole's service record and recovery journey. Anderson, you've proven that you're ready for assignments that make proper use of your extraordinary capabilities while supporting continued psychological wellness. Nicole felt relief mixed with anticipation about returning to meaningful service that utilized her actual training. Ma'am, what kind of assignments would be appropriate for someone with my background and ongoing recovery needs? Dr. Wilson smiled with professional satisfaction. Nicole, you'll be assigned to specialized training programs, where your Medal of Honor experience and combat expertise can benefit other veterans, while you continue receiving psychological support for complete recovery. 6 months later, Master Sergeant Nicole Anderson stood before a class of 20 experienced NCOs at Fort Leonard Wood's Advanced Combat Instructor School, wearing her Congressional Medal of Honor proudly, and the senior instructor badge that marked her as qualified for the Army's most demanding training programs. First Sergeant Martinez, who had requested assignment as her assistant instructor, watched as Nicole demonstrated tactical techniques that incorporated lessons learned from actual special operations missions and successful psychological recovery processes. Master Sergeant Anderson, your students are developing capabilities that exceed anything we've achieved in conventional instructor training programs, Martinez observed with obvious admiration for Nicole's transformation and professional effectiveness. Nicole smiled, watching experienced NCOs apply combat-proven techniques that she could finally share without compromising her recovery or revealing inappropriate classified information. First Sergeant, I'm teaching them methods that work when training quality determines whether soldiers survive their first combat deployment. Martinez nodded with deep respect, clearly amazed by Nicole's journey from struggling instructor to elite trainer. Anderson, you've taught all of us something essential about recognizing that apparent weaknesses might actually represent invisible wounds from extraordinary service. As Nicole watched her students continue their advanced development, she reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought her to this point in both her military career and personal healing process. She had spent 8 months accepting professional humiliation while processing trauma that made routine training feel psychologically threatening, when she actually possessed combat experience that exceeded that of almost any service member in military history. The recovery process had required more courage than any medal-earning action she had performed during combat operations. Learning to separate peaceful training environments from traumatic memories demanded professional psychological support and the understanding of medical specialists who helped combat veterans reclaim their strength without abandoning their hard-earned wisdom. Her phone buzzed with a message from one of her former basic training recruits. "Master Sergeant Anderson, heard about your promotion and your Medal of Honor. Thank you for teaching us that real strength sometimes looks different than we expect. You showed us what heroes actually look like." Nicole touched the Congressional Medal of Honor ribbon on her uniform, no longer hidden in shame but displayed as recognition of service that had never been diminished by the necessity of psychological healing and recovery. The woman who had failed every shooting test had revealed herself as one of the most decorated warriors in American military history, proving that healing from combat trauma takes extraordinary courage and that the greatest heroes sometimes need time and professional support to rediscover their strength while maintaining their capacity to serve others. Her students had no idea they were learning from someone whose actions had changed the course of classified operations that most military personnel would never know existed. The Congressional Medal of Honor represented just one recognition among dozens of classified commendations that could never be publicly acknowledged due to operational security requirements. During quiet moments between training sessions, Nicole often reflected on the soldiers she had saved during Operation Crimson Shield and wondered if they had successfully completed their own recoveries from that horrific 18-hour firefight. The psychological wounds they all carried were invisible but no less real than the physical scars that marked their bodies. Her recovery program had taught her that true strength wasn't measured by the absence of fear or trauma, but by the willingness to continue serving despite those challenges. Every day she chose to face her triggers in training environments was another victory against the psychological wounds that had once threatened to end her military career entirely. The Advanced Combat Instructor School had become more than just her new assignment. It had become a place where she could transform her painful experiences into wisdom that would protect future generations of soldiers. Her teaching methods incorporated hard-earned lessons about resilience, mental health awareness, and the importance of recognizing when fellow service members might be struggling with invisible wounds. Nicole's phone displayed dozens of messages from former students who credited her instruction with preparing them for successful deployments. One message particularly moved her. "Master Sergeant, your class taught me that asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness. That lesson saved my life during my deployment when I recognized I needed psychological support." The ripple effects of her recovery and return to meaningful service extended far beyond her individual story, creating a legacy of leadership that would influence military training for decades to come.